Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another super cool radio interview. I'm your host, Matthew Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have a great guest joining me at this time. He's a guitarist and vocalist for Las Vegas-based horror punk band Damned by the Night. Please welcome Joshua Tussinger.
Hi there. How's it going? Happy to be here. My good friends from Crimson Riot sent me your way. So I've seen some of your clips and whatnot. They look great. I'm ready to have fun with you and the rest of the crowd here.
Well, it's awesome to have you on the podcast. I recently discovered Crimson Riot. They are some of the nicest people who I've interviewed.
Absolutely.
So much fun.
Absolutely.
And they kick ass and rock.
Oh yeah, they kill it. I met them like just doing local shows, and I used to book shows at a little small pizzeria downtown called Evil Pie, and we did a lot of shows together. I had another band that I did here in Las Vegas called Jerk, and we used to do a lot of shows together. So that's how I got to know them a lot. But yeah, great band, kick ass.
Oh, for sure, they're super nice. I had a fantastic time interviewing them. So no, we got quite a bit to discuss with Damned by the Night. But before we do that, so it was a pizzeria music venue, so you can get like a slice of pizza and watch some great shows.
Yeah, it's still there. It's East Coast style pizza, and it's all Evel Knievel memorabilia locked in there. I believe even some of the family from the Knievel family has some part to do with the pizzeria, but you would get pizzeria inside the restaurant, and then there was a back area considered the patio, and we do punk shows on the back patio and like try to backline it as much as we could, and have like 3 or 4 bands. And I did that for like 4 or 5 years, but I did a lot of shows with Crimson and a bunch of other local bands, and that's how I learned to work with other touring bands and like get shows and push back and forth, like networking with them. But I had a great time doing that for the 4 or 5 years I did that.
Oh, that sounds really awesome. And actually, I'm a huge fan of Evel Knievel, so that sounds like such a fantastic venue. So if I'm ever out like the West Coast in Vegas, I definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, check it out. They have probably like 10 or 12 different pizza slices that you can pick from. Like you can get the pie, but obviously 80% of people just go in there and grab the pie and get a beer. There's tons of beer there too. But yeah, it's a great spot to just check out.
Oh, for sure, it definitely sounds like it. My favorite thing with Evel Knievel, and this was in his documentary. I just want to point that out I'll preference that before I say anything. He was like a manager or a coach for like one of the a hockey team, and he invited like the Russian team to do an exhibition with his team, and he didn't pay the Russian team, so the U.S. government had to step in to pay the team before it caused an international incident. And this was I think in the 60s or 70s, so right when tensions were already still high with everything. So yeah, Evel Knievel almost caused an international incident.
Yeah, that's crazy. What documentary? It was like Netflix or something? Or?
I think it was I Am Evil. It was probably 10 years ago at this point.
Okay, I will totally check that out. I could do documentaries like all day. That's my favorite.
Yeah, you should definitely check. I mean, the thing I really liked about Evil is he's jumping these stock motorcycles that shouldn't, no one else would really try. They were not modified, and he made it work. And that is, I think, just the most badass thing you could do.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much punk rock on a bike. So, yes.
Exactly. So, but now let's focus on Damned by the Night. So before we dive into everything, I do want to establish some background for the audience. So how did Damned by the Night come together as a band?
I kind of had an idea that I wanted to do a horror punk band for a while, and then COVID ran around, and had plenty of time to think and process. And then once COVID kind of came out of it, I did have a lineup before the lineup I do have now, and it didn't work out. And then in 2022, we put out our first single, Resurrection Upon Us, featuring myself, John Feeney on drums, Hanson Meyer on bass, and Jay Burbank on second guitar. And we put that out. and I wanted to just see what people would think of the track, and it went really well. And Hanson Meyer he's a real good friend of ours. He does this thing called TV Party Night at the Double Down Saloon. If you ever get a chance, that's somewhere you should stop in Las Vegas. It's been open for over 30 years. He does it there, but he played bass in, I can't even think off the top of my head what it was, an old 80s hardcore band, anyways. But he said, I can't really be in the band, but I can help you get this track out. And we got the track out, and then later on we found a bass player. His name's David Thompson, and John and David are in a band called Soldiers of Destruction. Great rock and roll punk rock band, based in the UK originally, and came to the States. But we did that single, and then we worked on put an EP out, which is From the Shadows of the Coffin, and we all worked that out. And 80% of that record is put out. All the writing from me and John Feeney on drums. So we did our first release show, and it went pretty good. And I just always wanted to push more for this band, and currently that's what I'm doing right now. There's not really any horror punk bands in Las Vegas, but we're not trying to be just a local band. We want to kind of like go on tour, and we have some new stuff popping up. But that's pretty much from fans of like the Misfits, old AFI, Calabrese, old Davey Havoc projects like Son of Sam, and darker end of like Danzig, but that was the whole reason I really wanted to do that band.
Well, for sure. And I've been checking out, the music in preparation for this interview, and I like, definitely some key aspects of it. It's a nice blend of like punk rock and horror. Because I know like some bands kind of lean like more one side or the other, but you guys have like actually a nice blend where there's some more like punks, like punk rock music, and then you guys include like some like samples. I believe like some samples or some, that's what I want to talk about. So like with these samples, I assume from some different types of movies or film. So like, how do you go about like finding some of these?
I mean, just like that record, I just had a couple. Like, I'm huge myself, and I would say some of the other guys in the band, like huge. I've always been huge on like 50s and 60s like B movie, from like Hammer horror film to Universal monsters. But some of those, I'm kind of a nerd, so I like watch like B movies over and over, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool clip there. See if I have the DVD. I'll see if I can just rip it off, and then we can put it in the recording. As an example, Black Sunday. I'm a huge Barbara Steele fan, and I wanted to do a song about Black Sunday. We didn't pull a sample actually from the movie, but just something to make it like very dark. The beginning is very dark, and there's like raindrops, church bells to make it more on the gothic end side to it. But there's something like Resurrection. We took some clips from Fright Night and House on Haunted Hill. But there's just like some of them I always thought, I was like, oh, that clip's pretty cool. I wonder if I could ever use it. But I do try to use like sample clips and just really raw and weird guitar chords to make that so it's like spooky and has a hard end to it. But that's pretty much and it's just the beginning. I feel that we have another record coming hopefully in the next year, and it's going to be harder and darker. But I'm a huge horror fan, and I do love using the sample clips just to give it that end to it.
Oh, for sure. And it adds like another like layer to the song as well. And I like when it's done, like, because there's some bands who like rely almost purely on the samples, and I don't like that aspect of it. But like, if it's there, like, kind of sparingly, and it kind of just adds more to the song, then I really enjoy it when it's done correctly.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I never wanted to like, because like you were saying about other bands, like some like kind of like overdo it with the samples. I just want to like a little piece here, and then it's the music and like vocal melodies and harmonies and stuff, and like that's pretty much the end of it. Just verse, chorus, bridge. We try to do like, especially the next record, we're trying to do like different things that we haven't done from the EP, so we can move to the next horizon for the band.
Oh, definitely. And before we kind of talk about the band, I did want to talk about some horror as well. So I'm kind of curious. Obviously, horror, as we've established, a very key aspect of Damned by the Night. So like, what got you into like horror movies or just like horror in general?
I was 10 years old, and my brother rented Leprechaun, and I feel bad even saying this, but I like when I watched it as a kid, I was like, wow, that was scary as shit. But I watch it now, I'm like, wow, that was like pretty fucking horrible. And but I like Leprechaun. I started with it, and then my family always would have like movie night, and we would like go to like Family Video or Hollywood Video and like rent like horror movies usually. And it was like have titles from like the first Scream that came out and Chewing the Corn and just more like 80s 90s like slasher films is where I started at but then as I was in my early 20s, I learned from like other friends like, oh, you should check out B movies. I'm like, what's B movies? And I like learned about the like more like 50s from the 50s 60s 70s like B movies. I was like, I love this more. I love the campy stuff. And but that's kind of how I got into horror movies and kind of just like clicked. And I learned about a lot of bands like getting into punk rock like Misfits to The Damned, to uh, like old AFI stuff when they were like Art of Drowning and just any of the older stuff they were putting out. That stuff I really liked that stuff, and I never took the time to actually put it out. But story to the end, like this isn't my first horror punk band. I was in a horror punk band in Indiana called the B Movie Monsters. I played bass for them for a while. That kind of got me clicked into like I was like, I kind of like playing in music that's vibe from horror movies. But that's where all my anything that, for me to get into horror, that's where it came from.
Oh, right on, gotcha. I'm kind of a newer to the horror scene. Like, obviously, I mean, growing up in the 2000s, so obviously, like, Scream's actually my favorite just because of, well, that's what was like very popular when I was obviously growing up. But honestly, that kind of got me into. So I like more like the slasher kinds, but obviously the more modern ones. Even though I've watched like some older ones as well, and I'm starting to kind of dip into that with everything. But it's also funny you said B movie monsters. I remember obviously since being living in Indiana, I remember seeing shows like show flyers for that. I can't remember like exactly when.
They started in 2008.
Okay.
I did one or two gigs with Grave Robber when I was real young. I was like,
I know them. Yes.
they were looking for a bass player, and like I said, I only played in like one or two bands before that. But I was like, I want to get into this and see what happens. But they've been around since like '08, and they're still around. Mike is the main guy from B Movie. I learned a lot from him, like just from like learning how to like actually record and like go through lines and riffs and do it correctly and go to the Metrodome, and that's where a lot of it started. But I kind of took it. I like where I started. I wanted to like do something on my own end, and that's kind of like why I wanted to do Damned by the Night. But we've been doing it for a while now, like 3 or 4 years. Just love doing like horror rock and roll. It's just fun.
Oh, it definitely is. And I think that's a great transition. I do want to cover kind of the live music aspect of Damned by the Night. Kind of starting off first, I see you guys got some shows coming up throughout 2026. So what can people expect from a 2026 Damned by the Night show?
You can expect, obviously, the songs being played from The Shadows to the Coffin, but we do have 2 or 3 new songs that we're working on for EP that we will be playing on the next run. We do have a run in July from July 23rd to July 26th, and it's a Southwest slasher tour with our friends Guilty by Association. They're a skate punk band from Las Vegas. Check them out if you ever get a chance. We're playing Phoenix, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Denver, and then we're heading back home. And after that, we're hopefully going to finish up this record, and possibly there's nothing confirmation right now, but possibly some stuff in early fall, October, maybe November. But that's pretty much it for shows, live shows right now. That's really all we're putting out.
Oh, for sure. And obviously got some great shows coming up. So I'm kind of curious. So maybe more of a challenging question, but I'm very curious for you. What is your favorite Damned by the Night song to perform live?
I would say My favorite is Black Sunday or Into the Dark. They both have their own like certain ways of doing live. Black Sunday is more like the vocals are at a higher octave and it's more of an upbeat. And then Into the Dark is kind of like it's kind of different from everything else that we recorded. Kind of, I mean, that song kind of reminds me of like when I was listening and I wrote that song. I was listening to like Wednesday 13 and like some early like Marilyn Manson stuff because that's like the intro riff is kind of on that line. But like they are two different songs, but I love playing them both live.
Nice. Those, yeah, definitely some great stuff. Resurrection is actually my favorite that I've listened to by you
Right.
guys. Yeah, it just I don't know, just kind of it comes to like all the horror and like punk rock. Like punk rock's like my favorite genre. So like listening to that, it's like it's just cool. Like just your guys' whole vibe is just I don't know. I really like it. It's different. It's not like just like straight punk rock music. You guys incorporate a lot of different stuff into it, which makes it like enjoyable. You know.
For sure. We don't. I don't like. That's why this band's a lot of fun for me. It's like one of the best lineups and one of the best bands I've ever been involved in. It's not just. It's just not punk rock. Like you got the punk rock element, and then you got the horror movies, always the lyrics, ideas, and then there's some parts with the bridges might be like kind of more metal vibe, or like it gives that spooky end. My whole thing is I never wanted just to be like, hey, we're a horror punk band. Like we're willing to play with like anybody or do any type of show, long as it's adjacent to punk rock or kind of metal or like just in that center, you know. But I always wanted to try to like not just be like typically like, hey, we only play with punk bands. Like typically we'll play with pretty much anyone from like surf bands to rockabilly psychobilly bands to punk rock bands, metal bands, anything that kind of just like kind of grooves right in there.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's the night having that kind of versatility where you can play with many different genres of bands and have it make sense, you know, and be adjacent to it. I think is very important.
Yes, for sure.
But also, I did want to ask. So, like, obviously, we kind of touched on like some of the live side, but also like some of the recording side as well. So, I'm curious for you. A question I like to ask my guests: like, do you approach like performing live differently than recording music in a studio?
Yes, a little bit. On the recording side, it takes. I mean, I feel like for us, like it takes a while. Like if I don't come up with it and John doesn't come up with it, it takes a while, like just to grip it all together. But putting like live, I feel like we put more energy into the live show than the actual recording. We try to like grab like that fire that you can only do so much with recording, you know, and the live shows we just try to vibe it up to the best we can, doing it live than we're doing it recording.
Oh, for sure. Oh, live shows are definitely more physical, you know, with
Yeah,
everything at the
for
crowd
sure. Yeah.
there. There's more of like feeding off the energy of the crowd. They're feeding off the energy of you guys. Obviously, it's a lot different in a studio when there's like it's just you guys. You know, there's not.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have a live crowd in front of you.
Right. Well, no, for sure. John, our drummer, he went to school in LA for recording engineering. So his like whole house is just a recording studio. So it is pretty nice that we have like a riff or something. We just send it like go and do like a small little track right there, and then he'll send off like, "Hey, I did something with this. What do you think?" So it is nice to have that, like where you can just every couple weeks you'll get like a track or a demo. Like, okay, that sounds good. Like, what if we can like add this and add that? But he does a great job. It's so I'm very thankful to have John on any of the recording abilities that we don't have. The other three were like, I don't know, how do you do that? It's like, but
Yeah,
it's nice.
it's a nice benefit to have for sure.
Yeah,
But also, I did want to transition. I have a fun question that I am curious for you because obviously, with like performing live and recording in the studio, there's also the like traveling to the venues or the studios or things like that. What's been like the most like unusual or like memorable like you know traveling to or from a venue or studio or something like that?
I can't think off the top of my head if we had any like really like memorable like recording sessions. It's kind of just like go in there and do. I mean, it comes to like where we're like, oh, we've had like 10 or 12, and it becomes like 10 or 12 beers. And I'm like, I think we should stop. I think we're really going to fuck this recording up if we go any further. Pound it into the mud. But we did, like I said last year, we did a little run with Guilty by Association. I spoke of earlier. We went and did some shows in Northern California. I don't really think, I can't think off the top of my head that there was any like funny moments, but like we always have fun, but I can't think of any like comical or any other than like we played in Santa Cruz at this place called the Jury Room. I can't remember the serial killer off the top of my head, but he used to hang out there. And it was kind of wow. And the bartender, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, that's crazy. Like, but nothing, I can't think of anything like super funny or anything off the top of my head for any of the, because we're, like I said, we're just starting out. We haven't had any, a lot of going out to shows and whatnot.
One more fun question before we start to wrap up this interview. So I'm curious for you. So like with performing live, obviously there's many different venues that are very unique or memorable. So like curious for you, what's been the coolest or most unique venue you have performed at?
I want to say it wouldn't be with this band, but I played Chicago a few times. My old band Jerk. But we played at Liars Club in Chicago, and that is like my favorite venue in like the whole world. Like it's just like it when you walk in, it's just like home, and it's like warm, and it's always a decent show. I would say all shows I've ever played in Illinois or Wisconsin have always been so much welcoming and very fun, and they have a great community of punk rock. But those will be my tops.
Oh, for sure. I've actually been to Liars Club. I saw a show there about probably a year and a half ago at this point, and very cool place, very haunted place. I don't know if you know the whole like lore or history about that. I'll tell it to you later because I just from what people have told me, I'm nothing concrete, but just what from I've heard from people. But
Okay, sure, yeah.
but yeah, it's such a cool place. It's definitely a vibe. And I had such a great time there. And their shows go late, so if anyone does go there, you're probably not leaving until 3 or 4 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, our first time we played there, like I don't know, I think we were there till like closing, and they're like, "Oh, you can't leave in here. You can't leave this Liars until you take a shot of Malort." That was like the worst. But I've had a couple shots of Malort like through the times I've been in Chicago, but every time I'm like, "Oh God, this is awful." It's like drinking gasoline.
And that is a Chicago staple, though.
Yes, it is a Chicago staple for sure.
But oh yeah, no, I definitely want to go back to a show somewhere, at Liars Club at some point, just because it's always a cool time. It's like as soon as you get in there, you're already like friends with everybody there.
Yeah, it's just so welcoming and it's fun, and every time you go back, you're like, oh, I just met another friend, or like I have like a group of people like I know. It's great to play there. I mean, you could play stuff like you could go and play like try to book a show like at Reggie's or like Livewire and stuff. But I just had just a great experience playing shows at Liars, and I always go back if I ever play Chicago. Liars is like my number one spot on the list.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And again, I like Chicago's got some great venues. No shade to any venue there, but like Liars just has that like you like familiarity. Like you already know people, or your people are already gonna know you. It's just it's such a fun time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So now, as we're starting to wrap up this interview, so I'm curious. So obviously, we're closing out March at the time of this interview. So what's kind of the rest of the year 2026 looking like for Damned by the Night?
Right now, we're finishing up demos for this EP that we've been working on off and on. Hopefully, we can release it in October or November. In July, like I spoke, we're going to do the Southwest Slasher Tour with Guilty by Association through Phoenix, Albuquerque, Colorado Springs, and Denver. And then possibly we have a couple shows tentative for October. Could be Midwest. It could be. There's a couple horror conventions that we've been talking back and forth with, but just kind of end the year out with a couple different tour runs. Or a lot of the time we do weekenders, 4 or 5 days. But if anything, the most focus for the band is to get this EP out, and hopefully we'll get it on vinyl and CD and digital streaming. Once I find out more about the information, if you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, I will put it on there, and links and stuff available when it comes to that time.
Very good. I will leave some links for Damn by the Night in the description of this podcast as well. Please check out, support them, and subscribe to their YouTube channel as well. Got some great videos on there as well. So
Thank you.
Of course. And everybody watching, go subscribe to them after you finish this video, of course. But all the links for all of that will be in the description of this podcast. But Joshua, thank you so much for hanging out and chatting with me.
Yes, it was a great time. If I'm ever in Indiana again, I will totally hit you up. It'd be nice to hang out, man.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I would definitely love that. If you're ever in the area, we'll definitely hang out and chat horror and Liars Club and all the fun things.
For sure.
For Joshua Tussinger of Damn by the Night, I'm your host, Matthew Thomas. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Super Cool Radio. And remember, stay frosty.
Thank you.